Hey guys, One Take Review, as well as the 12th entry in my Rock Hall Review series. This is a series where I talk about each of the current year's Rock and Roll Hall of Fame nominees. I pick one album by them and review it. And today I'm talking about Lionel Richie and his incredibly popular 1983 album, Can't Slow Down. I find it strange how incredibly successful solo Lionel Richie was in the '80s, especially with this album. I mean, this album won Grammy of the or Album of the Year at the Grammys. That's absolutely insane to me, especially considering he does literally nothing unique here. As a vocalist, Lionel Richie is okay. I mean, to be honest, he just isn't an engaging performer whatsoever, and I think that a lot of the ex-Commodore's work is just minimal effort at best here. He mostly comes across as lifeless, and the only time he shines as a vocalist is on the otherwise pretty mediocre track Hello. However, for the most part, Lionel Richie just doesn't seem to want to be on Can't Slow Down, and I get that he's meant to be a sort of heartthrob kind of figure, at least for this point in time, but he really just comes across more like bored jazz lounge singer than anything. Which is disappointing, because looking at this album cover, I get you're not supposed to judge albums or books by their cover, but look at how confidently that man is sitting on that chair. That implies this is going to be the most confident, engaging album you've ever heard, and it just isn't. It really is not. It is a nice chair, though. The instrumentals here were given a pretty hefty task, to be honest. It takes a lot of effort to actually be on an album with Lionel Richie and be less interesting than his vocals, but I mean, hey, it was achieved here, and I gotta give all the credit in the world to whoever came up with the instrumentals for this record. It's dated and it's corny, but not in a fun or charming way that other bands in the series like Duran Duran or Eurythmics are. It's just annoying, and not even annoying. Annoying is too strong of a word. It's just bland beyond comprehension. There are even the occasional sad, pathetic attempts to be funky, like Love Will Find a Way, that just aren't funky. They're the antithesis of funky. They make me feel absolutely nothing. As a quick side note, Richard Marx did some of the backing vocals for Can't Slow Down, and if that doesn't tell you this is going to be just an absolute snooze fest, I don't know what will. The lyricism here ranges from mediocre to straight up bad at times. I mean, this was released under Motown, which, I get it, it was the early '80s, it wasn't the, constantly putting out, masterpiece after masterpiece label that it was in the '60s, and they were still trying to capture that same idea by having the heavily romance-themed lyricism that they had at the time, but, I mean, Can't Slow Down in its writing is just as bad as its instrumentals. It can go from painfully uninteresting and unmemorable to just ridiculously cheesy. Songs here like The Only One just kind of feel like cheap attempts to be some '80s equivalent to some classic '60s and '70s romantic soul singers like Al Green, but the only difference is A, that I liked Al Green, and B, it feels like Al Green actually had talent. Whereas Lionel Richie, even though he obviously does have talent, there's no denying that, he doesn't let it show here, that's for sure. He just puts in zero effort to show off any of his ability in any category. More than anything, however, more than the poor lyricism, the bland musicianship, the mediocre vocal work, this album has one major problem. And you know what that is? It sounds like every other pop soul album from the '80s, at least every mainstream pop soul album. I guarantee you that if you go on like Billboard charts' history and you go back to 1983, the year this album was released, and you pick any soul album that hit the top 10, any pop soul album that hit the top 10, it will sound almost the exact same as Can't Slow Down and almost the exact same as Lionel Richie's solo career in general at this point. And I just think it's almost ridiculous how unimaginative and unoriginal Can't Slow Down is. If you couldn't tell, there's a recurring theme of unremarkability here. If you take a song like, say, Penny Lover, and you just put it next to any other majorly famous pop soul artist of the '80s that was sort of that, again, like, heart-throbby kind of figure, you're gonna have a difficult time telling the songs apart. They're so similar that it's almost laughable. And on top of that, Can't Slow Down is an album that is just so pathetic of an attempt to make something at least mildly original. I guess there was an attempt to make something mildly original. To be honest, I can't even say that there was, because it doesn't feel like there was. There's not a hint of originality throughout this record. This is every Lionel Richie album. This is every '80s top 10, top 5 charting pop soul album for the most part. this is enough to define that era of that subgenre, to be honest. So overall, Can't Slow Down isn't a bad album, but I want to give it a much, much lower rating than I'm actually about to give it. This is one of the most just disgustingly, horrendously, blood-curdlingly, most inoffensive albums ever made. And the oxymoronic term that is offensively inoffensive is perfect to describe this album. And if the title Can't Slow Down is implying that this is Lionel Richie at full force as a solo artist, then I'm terrified to see what he looks like in his duller moments, because I cannot even begin to fathom how much apathy that would ensue. So yeah, with that being said, I'm going to give this a 2.5 out of 5 because there's technically nothing wrong with it, and I could sit through it again if I had to, but there's just something about it that bothers me. I can't tell if it's the praise that Lionel Richie has gotten as an artist over time, when I don't see why, or if it's just because of the fact that I have heard this album thousands of times, even though I've only actually heard this album twice. So I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just the fact that it sounds like everything, and I'm just so oversaturated with this like 80s pop kind of soul sound, I guess, that I just can't stand this album. So yeah, 2.5 out of 5, but probably a lot lower if you force me to re-review it a little more on a biased level, shall we say. Now, this is the part where I usually sign off, tell you guys see you in the next video, but well, this is my Rock Hall review series, so I discuss, does this artist deserve to be in, and will they get in? As for deserving to be in, I don't think so, to be honest. This is maybe one of the only artists on the ballot this year that I'm just gonna say no to. I will, however, say the Commodores do deserve to be inducted, and I'm not a big fan of the Commodores either. I think they're very overrated, but the Commodores were a massively successful, very influential band, whereas Lionel Richie was just massively successful, and that's it. And I do think that's the difference between the two, and the Commodores deserve to be in. It'll also just get more inductees in as well, which, I mean, the more people that you can honor, the better, in my opinion, at least. But beyond that, at least the Commodores were original. When I hear a Commodores song, I can go, hey, that was the Commodores that I just heard, even if I've never heard it, probably, at least. Whereas Lionel Richie, besides the fact that his voice is so overplayed that I can recognize it, I would not be able to tell anything about this record apart from another album of any sort of similar vein. But anyways, I'm getting distracted because now I'm talking about how much infuriation this album builds in me. My point is, I don't think that Lionel Richie's solo was the right choice. They probably just want to do it so they can invite less people and still get a really iconic performer, at least on the ballot. But I think the Commodores would have been the much, much better choice, in my opinion. As for will he get in, I think he might this year. I won't say I'm surprised if he doesn't, but I think he has a chance to. I mean, again, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is really mainly only cared about commercial success over the years. The amount of years it took to get Black Sabbath and Deep Purple and the Velvet Underground, in the amount of years it took to even get A Tribe Called Quest nominated this year, it just proves that it's all about the commercialism and not really so much about the influence outside of the occasional nomination for a band like, say, T-Rex or Roxy Music. And I think that Lionel Richie is successful enough that he might get in. It might be a name that voters see on the ballot and they're like, oh man, he's not in, and then they check it off on their ballot and then he gets in that way. But at the same time, if he doesn't, there are a lot of big names on the ballot this year that I won't be surprised if he doesn't get inducted. He might get the Musical Excellence Award maybe this year if Fela Kuti doesn't, but I think with the controversy of Fela Kuti not getting in last year, I think Fela Kuti will probably get it. But if he doesn't, Lionel Richie might, just because it's kind of summing up both his solo work and the Commodores like they did with Nile Rodgers when they nominated Chic like 11 times and they couldn't get Chic inducted, so they're just like, hey, Nile, you want this? And you said sure, and the rest of the band didn't get inducted. So, I mean, Lionel Richie will probably get in, but I won't be surprised if he doesn't. So yeah, I'm giving Can't Slow Down 2.5 out of 5. I would give it a lot lower if I had listened to this album one more time. I probably would have given it maybe a 1.5, maybe a 1, depending, because this album just really just brings me a lot of hate. And not like a good kind of hate where I'm like, yeah, I'm ready to do something. Like, there's some albums that bring me good kind of hate, but this is just the kind of hate where I'm just like, why did this win Album of the Year at the Grammys? There's so many better albums that came out in that time period that could have been nominated for Best Album of the Year over this record. But, you know, whatever. Lionel Richie, I don't think he deserves to be in as a solo artist. I think the Commodores do. I think he might get in this year, but I mean, who knows at this point? He could just knock it in, and they might wait another year. He will get in eventually, though. Absolutely. There's no doubt the next 3 years. If he doesn't get in this year, within the next year or two, he will get in. And yeah, 2.5 out of 5 for Can't Slow Down. And with that being said, that's the end of this review, and I will see you guys in the next one. The next one, of course, being the one where I talk about another kind of proto-punk artist, considering I just talked about the MC5 not too long ago, the New York Dolls, with their most underrated album, in my opinion, which is Too Much Too Soon. But until then, again, see you guys in the next one.